Today's podcast is brought to you by 4Air, an industry pioneer offering sustainable solutions beyond just simple carbon neutrality. Its industry-first framework aims to tackle climate impacts of all varieties, providing a streamlined and verifiable pathway for aviation industry participants to effectively counteract and reduce aircraft emissions. The 4Air framework comprises 4 levels, each equipped with specific science-based objectives, independently verified results, and increasingly significant impacts on sustainability. This approach facilitates easy adoption for aviation users seeking sustainability. 4Air's expanded services include regulatory compliance monitoring and the Assure SAF registry, which is a digital registry for sustainable aviation fuel inventory management. For further details, please visit 4air.aero and assuresafregistry.com. And in 4air.aero, that's 4, the digit 4, AIR.aero, AERO. Welcome to Sustainability in the Air, the world's first podcast dedicated to sustainable aviation. I'm your host, Shashank Nigam, the CEO of Simplifying. Every Thursday, I have important conversations with top aviation executives, technology entrepreneurs, and policymakers helping aviation take climate action. Conversations that help separate the signal from the noise. Whether you are a frequent flyer or an airline executive, if you care about sustainability or simply love traveling, welcome aboard. Happy New Year! 2024 has been a pivotal year for sustainable aviation. Against a backdrop of increasing climate urgency, we have seen unprecedented action across the industry. Airlines have committed billions to sustainable aviation fuel. Airports are becoming energy innovation hubs, and manufacturers are accelerating development of new technologies. Throughout the year, we've had the privilege of speaking with leaders who are driving this transformation. In this special episode, we bring together voices from across the industry to understand how these different approaches are coming together to transform aviation. Their insights reveal not just the scale of the challenge, but more importantly, the pathways to meeting it. Let's begin by understanding why aviation leaders are taking action on sustainability. Diana Birkett Rakow from Alaska Airlines shares how their approach to sustainability is rooted in the airline's values.
Alaska Airlines grew up in the state of Alaska. We now serve some of the most hard to serve air service dependent communities in our country, as well as some of the biggest urban areas. But I think that history and that evolution of growth has informed sort of our focus on long-term value and our focus on taking care of each other. And we actually have a business model that we talk about delivering value for the 4 stakeholders that we are responsible to: our guests, our employees, our communities, and our owners. And they're usually represented in a circle because none of them are on top of one of the others. They all have to be in balance, which frankly is sort of the definition of sustainability in a way, right? So that ethos informs a long-term history with sustainability. And we've actually been reporting on our environmental impact since 2009. And we had a set of goals that sunset in 2020. And so when we were looking at those goals and how to restart them for the next phase, we looked at a series of 2025 goals, and we established goals across 3 areas: carbon emissions, waste, and ecosystems, including water. And the reason that we chose those are they're the 3 main impacts, major environmental impact areas for us. And then we also set goals in other, social impact areas, people, et cetera. But in the discussion with our board about those goals, we thought, okay, those are incredibly important and they force action now, but we needed to set something longer term, given our long-term orientation, and make sure that it was bold and ambitious, which is how we got to the goal of net zero by 2040. We talked about a net zero goal by 2050, and 2050 just seemed so far away. You could wait. And we said, no, we need to hold ourselves even higher, more highly accountable, which is why we set that 2040 goal.
This commitment to sustainability isn't unique to North America. In Europe, particularly Scandinavia, sustainability is deeply embedded in the culture. Scandinavian Airlines CEO Anko van der Werff explains how this cultural context drives their approach.
Scandinavia is truly different. I can say this, I'm objective. I'm not a Scandinavian by birth. We live here now. We're just started our 4th year, and I've done 4 years once before 15 years ago. And already 15 years ago when we got here, almost 20 years ago when we got here first, you notice that it's in their DNA. They live so much more with outdoors. They're so much more respectful of outdoors than I think anywhere that I've seen, at least where I've lived, and maybe Canada comes close, right? But I think here, truly, there is something different. I remember 20 years ago, I was working for a different airline, Air France KLM. We can, of course, talk about them as well in different ways. And I was a regional manager for some countries here, and I remember that we had to produce an annual sustainability report, corporate sustainability report for the corporates that wanted to fly with us. And if we didn't produce such a report, then those corporate accounts could simply no longer fly with us. And we went to head office in Paris and Amsterdam. We said, well, look, guys, we need this report. And there wasn't one. And so that tells you again that even forward-thinking, forward-looking, very conscious airlines such as Air France KLM, who've always been on the forefront as well, right? Apart from SCS, I think they are some of the airlines that are, really at the forefront of driving sustainability in aviation. That 20 years ago they weren't. When Scandinavia already was as a society. Heat pumps, how do you cluster heating, what has been developed already in the 90s, it's now being transported to the Netherlands or is being implemented in the Netherlands. And right, mature countries, high GDP, but the Netherlands is only doing that now, literally probably 25, 30 years after, for instance, Sweden did it. It is truly unique, that minimalistic style that you have in both, call it clothing and architecture, it just transpires into everything that they do. Why would you waste? Why would you use something that you don't have to use? And so the whole thinking of Scandinavia is already different. And of course, therefore, that has its implications on flying.
While the imperative for action is clear, achieving aviation's sustainability goals requires multiple parallel approaches. Airlines alone can't solve this challenge. Boeing's Chief Sustainability Officer, Brian Moran, explains their approach for industry transformation.
A couple of years ago, we grew increasingly frustrated by the fact that the conversation wasn't complete. And we know what the pillars are for decarbonization, roughly. I think most folks by now agree to it. And just to recall for your listeners, it really starts with fleet renewal. As an airplane company, it's about delivering more efficient airplanes that are 20 to 30% or so more efficient than the ones they replace. That's where we really make our difference. But then it's about operational efficiency as a second lever. Flying more efficiently, using the digital brains in the airplane to fly more direct routes, to avoid weather patterns, to stop circling around airports and have continuous descent arrivals, those technologies. Third, it's about renewable energy. And we already talked about it. How does SAF in particular, but also electricity and hydrogen, earn their way safely onto the airplanes? Fourth, it's about advanced technology. Right? That's what gets us exciting. New aerodynamic improvements, new propulsion systems.
One solution stands out as particularly critical: sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF. At IAG, the International Airlines Group, parent company of British Airways, Aer Lingus, Vueling and Level, and Iberia, Jonathan Council has set one of the industry's most ambitious SAF targets. He explains their strategy.
We thought a lot about setting a target for SAF. So back in 2021, we're the world's first airline to set 10% by 2030. 10% for IAG, roughly 1 million tons per year. That took some persuading because the global supply was 100,000 tons. So we were saying, IAG, we're going to commit to 100 times the global supply today in just 9 years.
How do you get there? Because there's just no supply.
Yeah, and we essentially it's the momentum. We looked at, rather than what is being supplied today, what is the momentum around constructing plants and also policy support. And we took a deep look at what was happening, particularly in the States, in Europe, and in the UK. And we were convinced that there was enough momentum to be able to enable us to source that million tons. And today we've sourced 25%, 250. We have committed contractual supply for 25%. By the end of this year, we hope we'll get to 34%. So you can source SAF, but the more exciting piece is the number of plants that are in planning and being constructed.
While airlines and manufacturers focus on aircraft and fuel, airports are reimagining their role in sustainable aviation. Pittsburgh International Airport CEO Christina Cassotis explains how they're moving beyond traditional infrastructure to become an energy innovation hub.
So first of all, we extract natural gas on our site. We sit on top of the Marcellus Shale, which is the largest natural gas deposit in the United States, literally under the airport and around Western Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Ohio. It's big. So before I got here, the airport had put out a request for proposals, and we have a company, CNX, that has wells and on site on the property. FAA approved it, and they extract natural gas. So that's why we thought, well, why are we not generating our own energy? And that was the impetus for the microgrid. So we built the microgrid, which actually was commissioned as a public-private partnership. That was commissioned in June of 21. We are 100% off the grid. I think we're the only airport in the world that's completely energy independent. We are working with a DOE patented scientist here in Pittsburgh to look at hydrothermal liquefaction, taking sludge, human waste, fats, oils, and greases. It's what Firefly is doing in the UK, and we are testing. We are testing on site with our sewer authority the ability to convert that into SAF. So and we're working with the Carnegie Mellon's Scott Energy Institute. They're really excited about what we're working on because they're working on hard to abate industries. So we have a lot of intellectual resources here. We have physical resources here. We're perfectly positioned. So why wouldn't we do this? Produce on site, blend on site, and export.
This innovation isn't limited to major airports. In fact, some of the boldest moves are coming from smaller airports. At California's Truckee Tahoe Airport, they have taken the unprecedented step of offering only sustainable aviation fuel. That's right, there is no jet fuel at the airport. General Manager Rob Etner explains their value-driven approach.
Our current price point for sustainable aviation fuels, the only product we offer, we're currently more competitive in the region than Jet A. And that's probably a different conversation about really getting the details of an important aspect of being a value-driven organization. And when you think about the large airlines or other big airports, public, private, majority of the big airports are, public entities, is that rather than being a transactional organization that's just worried about the bottom line of the dollar, you have to be more of a value-driven organization, identify what's more important to the community and the impact you're having locally and globally with your operations. And sometimes market-based solutions are not an immediate pathway to change. It's the assistance of involvement of the airport districts, the airports themselves, and helping identify what the value-based proposition of their movement into sustainable aviation fuel, where that price point should be, and not just trying to maximize profit constantly, could be a shift in how we think about not just putting the burden of change on the consumer. We're currently, on today's date, $8 a gallon for sustainable aviation fuel. The price point for Jet A is over $9 right now at comparable airports within short flying distance of us right now. It's all about margin and markup, the profit margin.
Success in sustainable aviation requires new forms of collaboration. Traditional airline-supplier relationships are not enough. Alaska Airlines has been pioneering new partnership models, particularly with technology companies. Diana Birkett Rakow explains their approach to corporate collaboration.
Unless we start somewhere now, we're not going to get where we want to go longer term. So we have to do that in a smart way, but there actually isn't, enough supply to go around. So we have to use some of the supply now and then continue to work on development of new supply for the future. The other thing is that our customers are starting to ask for it. And we're fortunate that we have customers that are not only starting to ask for it, but willing to collaborate on enabling it. So Microsoft, for example, is a good example of a partner that we have in Seattle. And we're fortunate to have a lot of great ones there in Seattle. But Microsoft came to us a couple of years ago. We started to talk back in, it was probably 2019, about how do we work together to make aviation more sustainable for the long term. And so we created the first partnership where we would uplift SAF and we would work with Microsoft to transfer the Scope 3 credits so that they could reduce the impact of their business travel. And we would co-invest in that SAF.
Beyond corporate partnerships, financing this transformation requires deep engagement with investors. The scale of investment needed is unprecedented. Some estimates suggest up to $5 trillion will be needed to decarbonize aviation. Jonathan Council explains how IAG is engaging the investment community.
I've seen, in the last 5 years, I would maybe talk to an investor every couple of months. I'm talking to investors every week now.
Wow.
So it's great that they are taking a strong interest. And essentially what they want to see is a robust and credible plan for addressing your carbon emissions. So that starts with our targets and then our roadmaps. And we spend a lot of time talking them through why we believe, each of those particular elements of our roadmap, why we believe they'll play the role that they will. And a lot of interest in sustainable aviation fuels, naturally, because we see that as not only the priority for this decade, it's really the only thing that is going to make a significant difference in our emissions up to 2030, but it's the only real solution for long haul. So a lot of interest there. And in fact, they, in terms of helping develop government policy, we spend a lot of time talking to investors because they have a secondary role. It's these guys that are going to pay for the plants. So, and it's going to take a lot of capital.
While sustainable aviation fuel is critical for the near term, the industry is also investing heavily in future technologies. Getting to net zero will require fundamental changes in how aircraft are powered. Brian Moran shares Boeing's perspective on electric and hydrogen aircraft.
Bill Boeing in 1929 had this beautiful quote where he talked about, and he almost admonished us to let no improvement in flying ever pass us by. And so it was a real reminder that when there is innovation to be had in aviation, Boeing better be part of it. And so if you look at electrification, right, the battery density is such that and Cascade shows this beautifully, 200-300 nautical miles, 15-20 people, that's impressive, that's exciting, but it's not going to decarbonize aerospace. And so there is a role for those airplanes and for those missions, but we have to keep that and be very sober about the fact that that's not going to decarbonize. But as a lead-in and as a pathfinder towards more hybrid propulsion technologies, that again is exciting, and it's our role to be part of that. We have a project together with NASA, General Electric, called the Electric Propulsion Flight Demonstrator, EPFD, where we're taking a Saab 340 and are installing a megawatt class hybrid engine onto that airplane, where Boeing is providing a lot of the airplane integration knowledge.
Airlines are also actively shaping the development of these new technologies. SAS Scandinavian has been particularly active in electric and hydrogen aircraft development. CEO Anko van der Werff explains their multi-technology approach.
We're excited about three things. SAF, eSAF, we have to do something. that will be, they call it lifeline of sustainability for years to come. Then there is electrical, and then there is hydrogen. And we're investing our time and where we can, some of our money in all three, right? So those are the three pillars that really are important. SAF, there is something here today. It's too expensive. We need to make sure collectively as an industry, as countries, as society, that the production goes up and that the price comes down. Then we get to electrical. So I think that's a 5 to 10 year project, and then we'll get into hydrogen in a second, right? So electrical aviation, the reasons for still being excited about it, there is tons of airports that are currently unequipped for bigger aircraft, where you are talking remote areas where there could be a use, and it could be ambulances, and it can be some cargo, and of course at some point it can also be passengers that you can unlock. Currently, the smallest aircraft that we're having is, call it the 75 seaters, ATRs, right? And that's the smallest that we in a way operate. So I continue my conversations with Hart to say, look, we need something bigger. They're working on a 30 seater. And again, you can be critical and say, well, it's a 30 seater. It doesn't fit the SAS network. And it's a start. It's the same as with SAF. And then you've got hydrogen. I think still questions around the technology itself, and can you fit the technology then into aircraft? That is something that we're working with, or we're contributing with, I should say, with Airbus.
Despite the progress we've heard about, significant challenges remain in scaling up sustainable aviation, from regulatory uncertainty to market development. Christina Cassates of Pittsburgh International Airport shares her perspective on the barriers that need to be overcome.
I think the biggest issue I see with SAF production everywhere, it is the issue, is the uncertainty in the in the regulations, and the uncertainty in, I mean, it's a nascent industry. It's early days. We don't have a global book and claim system. We don't have certainty in pricing. Their technology is happening so fast. So I think that the biggest issue with scale comes from the investment, right? Why would investors invest if they don't know when these if the IRA tax credits aren't going to last past 27? So I think that there's some certainty that the investment community needs in order to make those final investment decisions. And I think that there's also work to do with global aviation regulations around the SAF, life cycle. Now, how do you prove that it's the right SAF?
Yet despite these challenges, industry leaders remain optimistic. The benefits of aviation to society are immense, and leaders are committed to preserving these benefits while eliminating environmental impact. IAG's Jonathan Council explains why he remains confident about aviation's sustainable future.
Well, I'm passionate about aviation. Aviation for me is, huge global good. Yeah, it does so much, in terms of connecting people, connecting places, helping businesses. The prosperity of our society has been significantly enabled by aviation, but we are carbon intense. So, and I know people talk about we just need to fly less, but the economic benefits of flying are still more than 100 times, 2 orders of magnitude greater than the environmental cost. So let's get the carbon out. And when I look at the progress that we've seen in the last sort of 10 years, but particularly the last 5 years in terms of, as I say, hydrogen-powered aircraft, hybrid electric aircraft, the different SAF pathways, the greenhouse gas removal technology, so that's just in 5 years. And what are we going to see in the next 10, 15? So absolutely convinced that we'll have those solutions, but we will get there much quicker by working collaboratively.
As we've heard today, sustainable aviation requires unprecedented collaboration and innovation across the industry. From airlines setting ambitious targets to airports becoming energy independent, from manufacturers developing new technologies to the critical role of sustainable aviation fuel. The industry is mobilizing on multiple fronts to address the climate change. While significant challenges remain, particularly around scaling SAF production, securing investment, and developing new technologies. The commitment and progress we are seeing gives hope for aviation's sustainable future. The leaders we've heard from today demonstrate that the industry is not just talking about sustainability, it is taking concrete action. What's particularly encouraging is how different parts of the industry are coming together. Airlines are partnering with technology companies on sustainable fuel. Airports are becoming energy innovation hubs, and manufacturers are accelerating development of new technologies. This collaboration, combined with growing public and investor focus on sustainability, suggests that aviation can maintain its vital role in connecting the world while eliminating its environmental impact. Thank you for joining us for this special episode of Sustainability in the Air. From all of us at Simplifying, we wish you a sustainable and prosperous 2025. Thank you for listening to this episode of Sustainability in the Air. Aviation is one of the hardest to decarbonize industries, yet there are multiple paths to get to net zero. Awareness is key to a green future. So please give us your support to help our sustainable aviation insights reach a wider audience. You can do this by sharing this episode on your network, on LinkedIn, Twitter, or even WhatsApp. Or perhaps you might consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to this episode. You can start a conversation with us by writing to us at podcast@simplifying, that's simply with an i.com. And for more content on sustainable aviation, please visit our website green.simplifying.com and join the movement. Sustainability in the Air is an original podcast by Simplifying. The show is produced by Juraj Toth in Slovakia. Dirk Singer is our Director of Sustainability, who leads research for each interviewee out of Greenwich, UK. Shubhadeep Pal is our supervising editor based out of Mumbai and Singapore. The articles are written by Ayushi Badola in Dehradun in India and Mira Hull in Montreal, Quebec. Creative design is led by Ligia Esteve in Montreal. Baiba Drimen is the project director for the show based out of Valencia, Spain. Special thanks to Wendy Sim in Singapore. And I'm Shashank Nigam, the CEO of Simplifying and your host. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn.